Live from the KLPR studios, it's time for Bringing the Heat with Vita Cabrera, Trinity Law, Kade Moore, and Elijah Mosier.
Welcome in to Bringing the Heat. Week 3 now, guys. Where are we at? How we doing this afternoon?
I'm doing good. It's great. It's a beautiful day outside. The wind's finally gone. It's a great day to be a Loper.
Yeah, just dandy. I missed the eclipse today. I'm kind of bummed about that, but I'd have my glasses ready for it anyway, so.
Yeah, Kade, did you catch the eclipse?
Yeah, I catched it a little bit. I looked up just glanced up there a couple times for.
Bad.
Yeah, I didn't use my glasses, but I only glanced. I did not stare. So hopefully I'm okay.
It's bad for your eyes.
Yeah, I did not have the glasses, but I did walk out of my house today, and it looked a little odd. Looked a little darker than usual, so I thought that was pretty cool to run that back from middle school.
Yeah, sadly I was in class. Otherwise, I would have loved to see it. I mean, we got a great show planned today. Okay, we're going to be talking a little March Madness. We're going to finish that up. Next week, we'll talk about the championship match briefly. But we also talked John Calipari. He's going to Arkansas. The women's, the ratings just came in a little bit. I can't wait to get to that. A little bit Indiana State, Seton Hall. Kate always loves to bring up the Sycamores of Indiana State. Then in our B block later on, we'll be talking Marty Levinson. I don't know why I write Drew Levinson every time. Let me fix that quick. And so we'll be talking him and the hire that they made. I said last week that they were close to hire. Is probably going to come the next week. Well, sure enough, that night they announced it. And so they announced it on Tuesday morning. We'll also be talking UNK golf and soccer. And then at the end of the show, we'll be going through our hot takes. And then we have a great debate on for the end of the show. So let's get right into it. The women's Final Four in Cleveland this last weekend. Whenever we left things off last Monday afternoon, we had 2 Elite 8 matches to go, LSU and Iowa. Let's start right there. LSU, Iowa, that was a great game. Who wants to lead off with that one?
I'll go first, but yeah, Iowa was just way too much for LSU. Way too much. There's LSU just couldn't really hang with the 3-point prowess of of Iowa, so they just kind of fell behind that way. They didn't have a lot of shooters on their team compared to Iowa.
Trinity, what did you notice while watching that game?
No, I agree. Iowa just came out a lot stronger, I think, than LSU, and just transition, pushed the ball well, showed the ball very well as well. So I think that kind of just gave them the edge overall.
Well, the Caitlin Clark legacy lived on, and then in our other Elite 8 matchup, we saw UConn USC. This was a great nightcap, by the way. I loved watching this one. I didn't catch too much of LSU and Iowa. I had it on, but I was doing other stuff at the same time. But UConn and USC was a pretty good matchup.
Yeah, I watched definitely more of the Iowa-LSU game, but of UConn, Paige Beckers and Juju Watkins, the showdown there, that was a great game for both of them, but UConn just had a little more size and prowess on their side to win that one.
Yeah, I absolutely agree there.
So then let's bring in Friday night Cleveland, and the lights were bright for this one, and we saw Iowa, UConn. We'll get to that in a sec, but let's go South Carolina and NC State first. NC State made it in both the men's and women's Final Four, and South Carolina took over in that third quarter.
Yeah, South Carolina just had way too much size and way too much speed on their team for NC State to hang with. So they kind of showed that throughout the whole tournament. And so it was just they were the team to beat this whole tournament.
Mm-hmm. There's not really much to say. South Carolina they just have the right girls, like the size, the length, the athleticism. It's just tough to beat.
And they graduate all 5 seniors from last year's squad. That was impressive. We can talk more about them in a second. But then, oh man, Iowa, UConn. I hate that this is what it came down to. The foul at the end. I want to hear your guys' point of views first, and then I will go off on a spiel more than likely.
Yeah, at first I was saying you can't call that in that time of the game, but now looking back on it, it's like it was the right call. She was moving. It was a moving screen, so it's obviously the way that most people didn't want that game to end. They wanted Paige Beckers to have a chance to shoot that 3 to take the lead and beat Iowa, but she didn't get that opportunity. But it's just a real heartbreaking way to lose that game. But Iowa pretty much had control throughout the whole game, but then UConn fought all the way back there at the end, and then it was just too much Caitlin Clark. They played great defensively against Caitlin in the first half. Only allowed her to, I think it was 6 points in that first half, but or 6 or it was like 6 or 10 points. It wasn't a lot compared to what Caitlin usually gets. So UConn came out with a great game plan, but it was just Iowa is too much. They were just too much.
No, I totally agree. That had me heated, and just seeing stuff after it. So I definitely thought it was a moving screen, like Kade, like he said, like in a game situation like that where it is tight, for the refs to make that call is nerve-wracking and a lot of pressure. A lot of times refs just want to step aside and let it go and kind of let the game play. But in the end, it was the right call. It was a moving screen. I feel like if people would have looked back at it afterwards, Iowa fans would have been mad it was a moving screen that wasn't called on the other side of it. But afterwards, my roommates and I were talking about it, that Gabby Marshall had to delete her Instagram feed because she was getting death threats over this moving screen. Like, that's what frustrates me about social media. And I don't know, just all this. Athletes are just trying to play just trying to play their sport, enjoy their sport. She didn't make the call in the end. She was just playing how she was supposed to play. That's just the name of the game. One team is going to come out on top.
I mean,
that's that.
What else are you supposed to do in that situation? Oh, there's this person who moved up here. Split second, I'm just going to stop what I'm doing. No, there's nothing she could have done. But here's where I'm going to get into my spiel. And number one thing I'm going to say on this, I don't like ref ball. I don't like when the refs take it and make the deciding call. I don't like that. Even if it is the right call, I don't like it. I mean, anytime that we have a pivotal call, I just wish the final minute was always clean basketball and we wouldn't have controversial decisions from referees. And when I first watched that, I was like, there is no way that was a moving screen, because I got to go on ESPN for this. They did not give us a good angle on that replay to tell me whether that was a moving screen or not. Based off that zoomed-in replay that they gave me, I was like, that was not a moving screen. That was what I was seeing. But whenever I saw the wide angle later and I knew what I was looking for, she clearly moved in late. That was clearly a moving screen, and I don't like that. But how many calls throughout the game do they say, oh, let's just let them play on? And then, of course, yes, it was a moving screen, but it's not a black and white thing that officials call. You guys can tag in on this. And I just don't like that it was called. I wish they would have let them play.
Risky, controversial. I mean, that's like why the refs are there, though, because then if they did just let them play in that last minute, like anything could happen. People are desperate. People do want to get the win, so they're going to do whatever it takes. And like if that's a nudge wherever someone doesn't see it, like that's why refs are there, to keep the game clean and keep the game true. So although it is like a tough call to make in a timely manner, and just no one's going to be happy by it because it does seem like ref ball, but they did their job and they did what they were supposed to do.
Yeah, because people on the other end, if they didn't call, let's say they didn't call that moving screen, and then Paige Beckers comes around that screen and hits that three-pointer, then it's just going to be the complete opposite argument of, oh, that moving screen allowed her to make that shot. So it goes both ways.
I don't think anybody would have noticed that. I don't think anybody would have noticed it if Paige Beckers would have went around that, they wouldn't have called it, and would have shot a three and they won. I don't think anybody would have noticed. I don't think so.
There would have been a couple.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, I feel like there would be at least a couple nitpickers on Twitter with a lot of retweets, but Trinity.
Especially with replays, people see everything these days, so it's hard to miss something. And Gabby Marshall did end up on the floor and kind of like also sold it, because she didn't get ran into, so she was kind of dramatic falling back. So
she sold it well.
Way,
she sold it well. I'm not going to get on that, but I also don't think as many people would have gotten onto it as many would have first gotten onto it. But here's where I go back to ESPN. I wish they would have showed us that wide angle in during the game, because even after the game was over, Scott Van Pelt, everybody on there were like, that was a horrible call. That was not a moving screen. Like, they were all saying that. And that is a product of what ESPN gave us.
Okay.
Well, that's why Scott Van Pelt's not a referee. And those referees know a lot. You would actually be surprised how much referees know about the game. But I agree. It's just a tough call to make in that decision, or in that time of the game.
All right, I'll wrap this up with this. Beckers said it post-game, not one single play wins a basketball game or loses a basketball game. That's a quote right there. And I just hated watching that press conference on Scott Van Pelt post on Sports Center, because the first couple questions were about the moving screen, and I just don't like that. But it happened. Iowa played slightly better, and we can move on with our lives. Now let's get in to the championship match yesterday, and it was South Carolina and Iowa for the ship. I watched that. It was a great matchup. Of course, it was a multi-view of different things. I was watching the Minnesota Wild were on, so I was kind of watching a bunch of different things. But what were your guys' thoughts on the matchup?
Go ahead.
Okay, you can go. You're first.
So I thought it was a good matchup because Iowa going into it, all the hype around them, Caitlin Clark, it being her senior year, and then South Carolina going into it undefeated was big for them. And also the fact that they did graduate 5 seniors last year. They had a lot of younger players, girls that needed to step up in those roles within a short amount of time, and they definitely rose to the occasion. And it was just a great game to watch. It was definitely a game of runs. Iowa came out hot right away, had their first run, looked good. South Carolina had their run, kind of going back and forth throughout that first half. But then second half, South Carolina was just, they did their thing, kind of pulled out and took that lead and kind of used their size. And yes, I think also another thing that kind of hurt Iowa was their box outs, just because they're way too big to like not box out. They got a lot of second chance shots, and I think that ended up kind of hurting them in the end.
Yeah, Caitlin Clark in that first quarter started out with 18 points, and in that second quarter, she was only allowed to 3. So you have to give Don Staley and South Carolina credit for changing their defensive scheme against her to face guard her a lot more, denying her the ball. She was only had 3 points in that second quarter, so you have to give credit where credit's due there. And then another thing I noticed in this game with Iowa had 0 bench points. To South Carolina had 37 bench points. So I feel like the depth of South Carolina was just too much for Iowa in the end.
Yeah, I agree with that. And you mentioned the rebounding margins between both these teams, Trinity, and I look at that, and I pulled this up right now. I didn't think it was this bad until I looked it up just now. And South Carolina out-rebounded Iowa 51-29. 18 offensive rebounds. Iowa's a fantastic shooting team, but and no offense to, I got to make sure I pronounce it right, and so to Hannah Stolke, but she's not that big of a forward, and she wasn't what Iowa needed in order to get the rebounds and win the game. They were a great offensive teams, but in the end, it doesn't come down to Caitlin Clark not being enough. It comes down to there was nobody on the boards, because that's such a big factor of basketball. And Trinity, you can talk about with Shiloh McCool and Kaya Wilson and Bailey Sobzak. Those players play such a big part of your game. Even Jillian Ashoff with the amount of rebounds she had this season.
Mm-hmm, absolutely. And if you don't mind me asking, I don't know if you have it pulled up, but how many points they actually had off of their offensive rebounds, even though they out-rebounded them, how much they were able to convert? Because it almost seems like most of the time, rather than not, they were able to finish at the boards. But just from my outlook, my team, rebounding, it is a really important part of the game because it finishes possessions, whether it's offensively, you don't let the other team get another second chance. That's something that we're always talking about as a team. No second chance shots, finish with a box out so we can get going in transition. And then just the opposite of that on offense, that we want to get boards, we want to crash the boards. Also, not only to have a second opportunity at a shot, but also slow them down in transition so that someone's on the ball and they're just not getting easy outlets and easy transition looks.
And I'll lead off with this. Iowa had 7 offensive rebounds. They scored 16 second chance points. That's a pretty good job on the offensive side with the second chance opportunities that they did get. Meanwhile, South Carolina, their 18 offensive boards, they only scored 30. So, I mean, only is relative in this term, but at the end of the day, I think it was the rebounding that did Iowa in, and Iowa was fantastic. And I mean, I look at the players, and I watch some of those, like Keith Martin hit a couple great shots towards the end of that game. Gabby Marshall locked down South Carolina on defense. Their players did what they needed to, but the difference was, number 1, rebounding, number 2, depth, and bench points. It's just what it came down to, because 0 bench points versus the numerous bench points that South Carolina had. Their leading scorer came off the bench, and Tessa Johnson. I mean, South Carolina had all the pieces, and so while Iowa had Caitlin Clark, that wasn't quite enough.
I think that was even highlighted before the matchup by the reporters talking about how every game in this tournament they had a different leading scorer. So that just kind of showed how well they shared the ball, and that it wasn't one person leading this team, but that it was a team effort, that anyone can go off at any point. Even in the post-game interviews, kind of talking about that and hitting on that as well, that it's not one person, and that sharing the ball and celebrating each other's victories is also what led them to being national champions.
How about this stat? For Iowa, they had only 6 players that played more than 10 minutes, 5 that played more than 14 minutes, and they had 3 players that played all 40 minutes. A couple of them got subbed out late, obviously. Meanwhile, South Carolina didn't have a single player that played all 40 minutes. The top 2 players that played the most time were Raven Johnson with 37 minutes and Camila Cadarso with 31 minutes. I think I messed that up a little bit. Like, she is not afraid to share the wealth on giving her players time to play.
Yeah, and that's what Don Staley's always talked about, is like these players, these younger girls that have waited and not transferred out of South Carolina to get their opportunity to play. Because last year, like you said, they graduated all 5 of their starters that were seniors. And so that's just kind of a testament to their program and how their depth has been over the last, since Don Staley's been there. But yeah, it was just Camila Cardoso being 6'7", and against the 6'2", Hannah Stolke was just way too much. And then it was just way too much size on the side of South Carolina for Iowa to handle, because Iowa can shoot the ball lights out, but they don't really have much size. It's a lot of outside game for them, for Iowa. So they shot decently well from the 3-point line, 9 for 23, but they kind of kept Caitlin Clark in check. She finished with 30, but she had 18 of those 30 points in that first quarter. So you have to give credit to South Carolina for that.
Absolutely. And just having fresh bodies is so important. It is a long tournament, and it is a long season. This is the end of or beginning of April now. It's like a lot on your body, and just as an athlete. So having fresh bodies to be able to rotate in there, not having one player in there for the entirety of the game. Even though teams have those players, there's always going to be a couple players that will play most of the game just because their contribution to the team and what they can do on the floor. But having fresh bodies is definitely important in what they're able to do and keep transition going. And that's something that they pushed very well in transition to the second half. And you can just kind of tell that Iowa was slowing down and wasn't able to keep up as much.
And Trinity, I want to ask you this question. Kade, you can tag on to if you have something to add to it. But is that the amount of players that were played, the differences in the minutes, is that a coaching thing, or do you think that was just the depth that the teams had?
I think it was honestly the depth that the teams had. It can be both ways, but also that comes with trust and having the time on the floor as well. Giving all those players those opportunities throughout the season builds trust with your coach, so then they're more willing to put you out on the floor. It's just a matter of who coaches trust in tight games and in big game situations, as well as just also being able to have that depth and be able to throw anyone in there and know that they're going to be able to get the job done.
Yeah, I would say it was more of a talent thing. I think South Carolina has a much more talented roster. Like the starting 5 at Iowa with Kate Martin, Gabby Marshall, Caitlin Clark, Sydney Falter, and Hannah Stolke is a solid starting 5. But other than that, off their bench, it's Hannah O'Grady. She's the big girl that subs in for Hannah Stolke. But other than that, they don't have a whole lot of talent. You could say Taylor McCabe came in from Fremont. She has played a little bit, but South Carolina is just I just feel like they have a more talented roster throughout. It's more evenly balanced for sure.
I agree.
I think it could be a little bit of a mix of both, and it could just be Lisa Bluter didn't feel as confident in her other players, and so that's why I wanted to ask that question there. But ratings came in a little bit before, 18.7 million viewers. And they say that they're expected to grow in ratings following a complete reporting from Nielsen. So that's not even the final number yet. And so that is up 89% from last year, peaked at 24 million. We'll get into more of it later on in the show towards the end. But, I mean, what an historic weekend for women's basketball. Now let's cycle into the men's side of things, as it was I don't know, it just seemed less interesting. I mean, I went to a Tri-City Storm game and watched them beat the Sioux Falls Stampede 6-3 versus watching the men's Final Four in Arizona. I mean, let's lead off with everybody's favorite DJ and DJ Burns, NC State and Purdue. I mean, Kade, you can take that.
Yeah, Purdue just was way too much for NC State because they tried going one-on-one with DJ Burns against Zach Edey, but he got into early foul trouble, picked up a stupid reach and foul at the start. So like he was their main guy guarding them, and then Ben Middlesbrook off their bench was the other guy trying to guard him. So every single time they would try and double Zach Edey, it would leave open one of the Purdue shooters. And that just like you need Purdue to miss those open shots for you to even have a chance. Because if you go one-on-one against Zach Edey, it's going to be a hook shot for him right in the middle lane every single time, with him being at 7'4". So just the lack of size for NC State just was a thing they couldn't handle with Purdue having 7'4" Zach Edey, and then with Purdue going 10 of 25 from three, nearly 50%. It's just hard. It's just hard to beat a team like that.
And it was a super low scoring game too, 63-50.
Yeah, it was sloppy throughout in the first, and I think both teams had around 25, 30 points in that first half. So it was a pretty sloppy game throughout, but that's what the sideline reporter at the end of the game came up to the head coach of Purdue, Matt Painter, and was like, it was a sloppy win, but you got it done. So I couldn't agree more, and that's and how Purdue got it done against NC State.
Trinity, any comments there?
Like you, I didn't really watch a lot of the men's side. And I feel like this year with Caitlin Clark, a lot of the hype up was on the women's side. And of course, being a women's player, I'm going to pay more attention to the women's side. But yeah.
All right. I'll tag in whenever you get to the championship talk for tonight. But UConn, Alabama, 86-72 in favor of UConn. Alabama gave them a run for their money early on. They used that hot shooting to give the Huskies a challenge. But Dan Hurley's squad is, once again, they are on... Well, I can't even say they're on par because they're like 25 shots under par.
Yeah, they have won, I think it's 11 straight or 12 straight games in the NCAA tournament by double digits, and it's just nearly impossible to like try and beat this team because they play such good defense. They play so well on offense. It's like a science how Dan Hurley operates it. So they're a really fun team to watch. But Alabama hung around. But that's what UConn has done with some of these teams. Like with Illinois, it was a tie ball game around halftime, and then they went on a 30-0 run at the end of the first half, and then the start of the second half. So it's just way too much for UConn. They're really well sized, and it's just they're going to be a tough team to beat.
Yeah, it's really crazy what UConn has done this year. Let's get into the championship preview for tonight. It is on TBS tonight, and I'll lead off here with what we're expecting. I'm expecting this game to be in the 60 to 70 range in a ball game. I think the champion will be decided by somewhere between 8 to 13 points. And I don't know. I'll tell you who I pick here in a little bit. But I think the key to the game is, can UConn shut down Zach Edey?
Yeah, and I think everyone kind of didn't pay too much attention to those Final Four games because they just expected this Purdue versus UConn matchup. Because
I did.
I think that's what everybody thought. So I feel like that's why the women's had a lot more publicity. There was a lot more unpredictableness for the women's tournament. You didn't really know who's going to win Iowa, South Carolina, but I feel like Purdue and UConn were pretty much they were the favorites in these two games. So I feel like they didn't have as much not as many people watch those games because they kind of already knew the outcomes. But so yeah, I think Donovan Clingan's going to be able to handle Zach Edey because they're just going to be able to go one-on-one against Zach Edey. But it's going to be an interesting matchup with UConn being number one in Ken Palm offense efficiency. I can't say that for some reason. And then Purdue is third in Ken Palm. So, but I think the main factor with this is the guard matchups because the guards for Purdue are 6'1", 6'4", and 6 foot. And then on UConn, they're 6'4", 6'5", and 6'6". So I think the size discrepancy for the guards for UConn is going to be the difference in this game because I don't feel like the UConn or for Donovan Clingan and Zach Edey, they kind of cancel each other out being 7'4" and 7'2". But with those guards, the size discrepancy, I think UConn's going to handle Purdue pretty easily today.
Trinity, any thoughts on tonight's matchup?
I'm just thinking it's going to be UConn over Purdue.
Well, I'll tell you what. What we've seen in history, when a 1 seed has lost to a 16 seed, the next year they have won. Virginia did that after they lost a few years back to UMBC. And then last year, Purdue lost to FDU and Fairleigh Dickinson. And so can they do it again, make it 2 for 2? I don't know. But I also know that 14 of the last 15 men's college basketball champions scored an odd number of points in the round of 64. Only one of these two teams have done it. You want to take a guess at who did it?
Purdue.
It was UConn. UConn scored 91 in the first round. Purdue scored 78. The only team that didn't was 2016 Villanova. And so that could stay true. But give me Purdue to win the championship tonight.
I think UConn. I think Purdue will hang around like Illinois and how Alabama did. But I feel like UConn's just going to pull away at the end. I feel like they have way too much size on their team, way too much shooting. They play too well together, and they are so good on the defensive side of the ball with Donovan Clingan. I think Donovan Clingan is going to shut down Zach Edey. He's going to expose him tonight. So I got UConn.
Trinity, who you got?
I got UConn.
All right, well, a rocker in the college basketball world last night, John Calipari, has decided to leave Kentucky to go take the spot left open by Eric Musselman when he went to USC. And he'll be the head coach at Arkansas, a bizarre move. But what does this tell us about the landscape of college basketball, Kade?
I don't know. This is kind of a shocking move to me, but I've heard some rumors that both sides are happy about this. The Arkansas fans are obviously happy about getting John Calipari, but the Kentucky fans were getting kind of sick of John Calipari. The last two of the 3 years they've lost in the round of 64, and I think it was just time for a change and a time for a change of scenery. So I think it was the best of both worlds for this move and John Calipari moving to Arkansas.
Trinity?
Kade said it best.
All right, well, you know what? This is a move that tells you that legacy and what you've done before and that your history means nothing anymore. And people just don't stick one place anymore. I mean, I can't even think of a college football example right now. I'm trying to... it'd be like Dabo Swinney going to take the head coaching job at like North Carolina. Like, it would just be some unheard of random thing from a legacy coach at one place. He was there for 15 years, and it shows that money and relationships talk. And because one of the boosters from what I was seeing on Twitter for Arkansas is the heir to Tyson Foods, and they're good buddies and can bring in a lot of money. And he brought in a good coach, and that just shows you how icy those waters were in Kentucky.
Yeah, I think money talks now, and you've seen that with Trev Alberts as the Nebraska athletic director too, leaving to Texas A&M for more money. So I think wherever these coaches can get the most money and get the most leverage is where they'll go.
Not to mention relationships, because it's been sketchy between the Board of Regents at Nebraska too. And who knows how much water he was under at Kentucky with his recent non-success in the March Madness, because he hasn't had that. And I mean, I don't know how much he'll have that at Arkansas, but it just shows that he wants what he thinks will be better for him and a stronger foundation for him. But we'll see if the grass is greener for him over there.
Yeah, I think you're seeing now his teams are mostly all freshmen, and he has a brand new team every year because all those freshmen are top recruits, and all of them go to the NBA. So you're seeing that now in the tournament. Those teams that with all freshmen are not successful. It's more the junior, senior-led teams that are much more successful in the tournament.
All right, I gotta shift over to the NIT. They concluded the NIT tournament earlier this last week, and I believe that was on Thursday night. Whenever I don't even know what I was doing, but now I know why I didn't watch the women's Final Four games on Friday night. I was working, but funny how things work like that. But the Indiana State Sycamores took on Seton Hall, and I told you I think Seton Hall should have been in the March Madness field. I didn't think Indiana State should have been. I think they were rightfully left out. I didn't think they beat anybody, And I don't know if that changed anything for you, what you saw in the NIT. It definitely didn't change anything for me, but it did prove that if you want to make a statement and prove that you should have been in, I said this week one of the show, that go play in the tournament and go win it. And that's what Seton Hall did.
Yeah, I appreciated, like with Seton Hall, their counterparts from the Big East didn't play in the NIT, but they decided to play and ended up winning it. But then you have to give credit to Indiana State. They beat a lot of good teams throughout this tournament. But I think, in my opinion, Indiana State and Seton Hall would have been a perfect first four game in the NCAA tournament. And then with Colorado, I think you could have taken out Boise State and Virginia and added Seton Hall and Indiana State over those teams. And so then you would have had a Colorado State first four matchup. And that's my opinion. Because if you look at in the NIT, who Indiana State beat, they beat SMU. They didn't really beat anyone well, but they lost to a Dayton team by 2. Minnesota beat Michigan State, Nebraska, Northwestern. Cincinnati beat Kansas, BYU, TCU, Texas Tech, and all the teams I'm naming, by the way, were in the tournament. Utah beat St. Mary's, BYU, Oregon, Colorado, and then took Arizona to triple overtime, which they ended up losing. And then Seton Hall only lost by 2 points, and then Seton Hall beat UConn, Providence, Marquette, and St. John's twice. But they ended up losing by 2 points, but they were in it the whole game, and they were up and just lost the lead at the end. So I think the people that were saying that Indiana State was not worthy of making the tournament were completely wrong, and they were the highest team in KenPom ranking not to make it to the tournament. So that's just my take on it. And then if you look around in the Power 5 leagues, Rank Bask, Lance Jones, and Marcus DeMass were all Missouri Valley players, and Lance Jones is in the national championship. So the Missouri Valley has conference, and I think they were rightfully left out.
If you're listening online, Kade just called me completely wrong, and we'll never know if I was completely wrong. But I'll say it this way. Indiana State, by going to the NIT and making the run at the NIT championship, that was better for the school to be left out and make that run than if they were to make March Madness, unless they did some NC State miracle run.
Yeah, I agree with that. I feel like next year, if they have another year like this, they're going to get put in for playing in the NIT, and those teams that were left out or that were invited but then didn't go are going to be stuck in the same situation. So I appreciate Indiana State for playing in the NIT tournament. But they were just we'll see if they were just a fun team to watch. We'll see how many of these guys stick around. If they like all these mid-major players now, they go and transfer to bigger D1s after successful seasons. So they were a team that nearly averaged 90 points a game, and they scored the crap out of the ball. So they were fun to watch, but it'll be interesting to see how they do next year.
I appreciate Indiana State and Seton Hall making the NIT worthy to talk about this year, when normally it is not worth mentioning at all. Even though it used to be played at Madison Square Garden and now it got played at Hinkle Fieldhouse, Butler's home place. I don't care so much about the venue, but it was worthy to talk about. And then next year Fox will do their own thing, and I know they gave it some fancy name. We'll see what happens with that. Any conversation on the NIT, Trinity, now?
Don't have much to say about that.
All right, well, that will conclude our March Madness talk. For right now, we'll bring back up at the end of the show. But when we get back, it's time to talk all things Lopers on Bringing the Heat.
I chose SAC because I wanted to make a difference in athletics and wanted to be able to stay involved.
I chose SAC because I felt I could provide essential input to our athletic department.
I chose SAC because I wanted to bring together the athletes and the people of Kearney in order to support each other.
Everyone has a different reason, but being a member of SAC, the Student Athletic Advisory Committee, gives you the chance to get out and do something within the athletic department at Nebraska Kearney. Choosing SAC is choosing to make a difference.
I've been skipping meals to try and lose weight and reach my fitness goals.
I wish I wasn't, but I have been skipping meals because I don't have time with my busy school schedule. Whoa, you guys have it all wrong. Skipping meals can actually cause an increase in body weight due to a decrease in energy. Additionally, an irregular eating schedule that includes skipping meals can disrupt the body's internal clock, causing poor sleep and an inability to focus, leading to poor academic performance. Make it a priority to eat at least 3 meals per day to reach your full health potential.
Peru, Ireland, Spain. Change your life. Be an exchange student. Study abroad. The Office of International Education offers several incredible opportunities to live and study in a foreign country. You can go for 3 weeks, 6 weeks, even a whole semester.
Studying abroad has completely changed me for the better.
Best decision of my life. It was the most amazing, life-changing experience I have ever had.
Don't wait. The time to apply is now. Get information at unk.edu/study abroad.
Life can get complicated. Sometimes it's overwhelming.
Telehealth and in-person visits, personal and group counseling. Talking with a mental health counselor can provide a safe, neutral, and confidential setting to help you explore your options. To schedule an appointment at the UNK Student Counseling Clinic, visit unk.edu. For emergencies, call 308-865-8248.
Back here on Bringing the Heat, Elijah Mosher alongside Kade Moore and Trinity Law. Vida Cabrera is unable to join us this week. Maybe next week we'll get all four of us finally here, or maybe Kade or I might be out. Who knows what will happen, but that's the trajectory we're on right now. Let's get into Loper talk right now to start off our middle segment here. The big news from this last week, the men's basketball team has found a head coach, and it is none other than Marty Levinson. He used to play at UNK back in the day, and it is a hire that, to me originally at least, until I talked to Coach Rob Brennan on Friday night, I thought it was a little bit of a perplexing hire. Of course, it had the UNK history, but coming from JUCO to Division II, I wasn't sure how that was going to translate. But then Brennan started talking to me, and he talked some sense into me. At JUCO level, and what he was doing is you basically have 1 year to work with those kids. And the runs that he was making out there at the JUCOs he was at, and let me pull this up quick, were impressive. And this last year, he was at Trinity Valley in Texas. And he did some great things there. I believe he finished 27-9. Let me get the exact record pulled up. And yes, 27-8 down in Athens, Texas. But lately he's been at Southern Arkansas University. And I believe that's a JUCO school. Saddleback Community College, he was an assistant coach. I'm not going to be able to pronounce that, but a community college in California. He was an assistant coach there. He was a head coach at Central Community College in Columbus, another JUCO school, for 3 years. Like, he has done a great job at JUCO schools for so long, and now he's getting a D2 opportunity.
Yeah, I really like this hire by UNK. I listened to his interview when he addressed the media on Friday, and I really liked a lot of things that he said, because he mentioned kind of right off the bat that he wants to bring in these Nebraska kids. He wants to bring in Nebraska high school players, and he was looking at a couple of Division I transfers from Nebraska. And so things like that I like a lot to hear from him. And then him talking about that he wants his teams to play together and play tough defense. And he mentioned that multiple times throughout his press conference, talking about defense, and you're going to have to play hard to play on my team. And then he talked about building connections within the community and building relationships with anyone who is, whether on campus or going out to restaurants and talking to people. So I really like those things out of him. And for me, I've thought about coaching in my later in my life, and so building teams off playing together and playing defense, you will be successful in those two. Or if you do those two things, you will be successful. You will be a successful team.
Absolutely. I like that. I didn't get to hear much about it, but just hearing you, Kade, cover most of it, of kind of what he all said, I really like the idea of getting more people from Nebraska. I feel like that has been kind of lost throughout the years. We've had a lot of transfers just from all over the place, and that can be hard just to have people all from everywhere. And I feel like we've had a lot of people come in and out over the years. So getting a team that plays together, sticks together, and that being his number one initiative is getting a team rallied together within our own backyard pretty much here, and then also getting that team focused on defense. I feel like that's a lot of people just want to focus on offense, who can score the ball more, but having a tough, well-rounded team and starting with defense is a great place to start, especially when you're a new coach coming in.
And can you guys guess how many players we had on the Nebraska roster? How many players we had from Nebraska on this roster this last winter?
One.
I was going to say, I only know Winston Cook.
Two, yeah.
Clayton Moore.
Yeah.
Oh, Clayton, yeah.
I forgot about Winston.
The redshirt freshman. And you know how many players we had from California?
4? 3?
2. Oh. But how many did we have from Colorado?
3.
And so you mentioned the wanting to bring in talent from Nebraska. Well, let's look at where Marty Levinson comes from. And back whenever he was a player, he played his first 2 years of high school ball at Grand Island. Then he went on and played at Bellevue West High School, powerhouse in basketball, of course, in Nebraska, state runners-up, and then the state champions. And then he went on to Augustana, then Southeast, before coming to UNK. But how many times have you heard of the top talent in Nebraska going to UNK? It's just not happened in recent years, and Marty could be the guy to change that for UNK, and it'd be much needed.
Yeah, and the state of Nebraska has talent, and you could see that this year in the NCAA tournament. It helped that Creighton I think it was in the Sweet 16. There was, or maybe it was total. I forgot the number, but there was 8 players from Nebraska in the Sweet 16. I think the number was, but that helps with Creighton being there, and they were New York City had 11. So that just shows you the talent of basketball that Nebraska has had and like throughout the last couple of years. And my junior year of high school, there was 3 teams in the top 25 in high school basketball here in Nebraska. That's at the Division I level for all those players in the Sweet 16. But with Bellevue West, Miller North, and Creighton Prep all the way to the top 25 in 2021 just shows you that Nebraska does have talent. And I've talked to some players that have been interested in coming to UNK and wanting to play, but they just didn't know the whole landscape, how it's been the last couple of years. So I think there is talent in Nebraska. So if he talks to the right people and gets the right relationships going, I think he can get a pretty good team here full of Nebraska kids in the fall, or in the winter, you could say.
And not to mention Reggie Thomas, who was just the GPAC Player of the Year at Hastings College. He just committed to North Dakota and at the end of last week. And that's a great player that came from Omaha West Side. So there are a lot of great top talent in Nebraska. And I just checked on verbal commits. And so there's still just 10 players in the transfer portal from Nebraska Kearney. Nobody has decided to go anywhere. There's still just 2 players claimed more, and Tom Conley on the UNK roster. So we haven't seen any much of roster changes, but it's just been 1 week. We'll see how that goes. But you mentioned talent in Nebraska, and I want to bring up this stat dug up. I saw it, Mike Sauter retweeted it on March 18th, but I got to read this correctly. But the amount of players per million in state in the NCAA tournament this year, Nebraska had the most at 8.79 players in the NCAA tournament per million in that state. The second highest was Indiana. So Nebraska, if you break it down like that, has some of the most talent.
Yeah, because and then looking back at it, there's a lot of players that went to the Summit League schools, like Frankie Fiddler went to Omaha, and William Kyle Jr., he went to South Dakota State. And those are 2 players out of high school that went to Bellevue West but weren't recruited by Nebraska or Creighton. And now both those players are getting looked at by the 2 big Nebraska schools in Creighton and Nebraska. So it's nice seeing that. And then with St. Thomas, too, from Northern Colorado, there's just players from all over the place. And then Chucky Hepburn at Wisconsin, Hunter Salas at Wake Forest. The list just goes on and on with Nebraska talent. And then Latrell Wrightsell from Omaha Central playing at Alabama. So there's Nebraska talent everywhere. And I think if we can get a couple of these Nebraska Division I, well, this is Nebraska basketball-wise, but getting a couple of those transfers or getting those players that went to smaller schools, getting them back at Nebraska and getting them playing for the Cornhuskers or the Blue Jays. But I think the same goes for UNK. Maybe those players that didn't play as much at a Division I, like a Connor Creech or players like that, to get them back here at UNK to be on this Loper squad.
You mentioned Connor Creech. I want to look that one up because I just saw his name. I feel like I saw his name on verbal commit, so I want to double check that here first before I move on. But I got to move my microphone so I can do this.
Yeah, he went to Hastings High. I played against him in high school, and he originally walked. I'm pretty sure he walked down to Northern Colorado. I don't know if he got offered or not, but he played a little bit this year. But he's in the transfer portal, so I don't know for sure if he wants to come to a smaller school or go to another smaller D1, but he would be a great get. And then I've talked to some kids from high school that went to smaller NIAAA schools in Nebraska that are in the transfer portal that are considering coming to Kearney too. So I think there's a lot of opportunity for Kearney here to get a lot of Nebraska talent on this roster.
Yeah, he hasn't committed anywhere yet. I was just double checking on that. But either way, best of luck to Marty Levinson as he builds his coaching team up. Trinity, do you think he'll make the cut?
For the men's team?
As being their coach.
Oh, for sure. It's always nerve-wracking when you just being a new coach coming in as athletes, but I think it also kind of went to his benefit of having a fresh start, being able to have his pick at kids. Obviously not fun for UNK to have to go through a whole new roster, but I think it'll honestly help him in the end kind of be able to handpick those athletes that he would like and give him a good first year.
Yeah, I think it's a great restart, and it's a 3-year deal for him. Moving on, UNK Golf. They won the Newman Invite last Monday, and then they'll be at the Wildcat Classic in Wayne next Monday before the MIAA Championships. Trinity, what do you got on the golf squad?
Yeah, I saw a little story today that I wanted to share. Juliana Botero, I think it is, I might be butchering that, is one of the best players in Kearney. They kind of had a highlight story of her on Instagram with her having 6 finishes inside top 10 in 8 varsity events. So she's averaging 77.64 as a scoring average, equaling the new Loper record. So, and she attributes a lot of her success to her attitude, saying it's not how far a player can hit, but just that she's going to have the better attitude than the girl standing next to her. And she's also an international player, not something that UNK Golf has had a lot of. Something Coach Sean Roadhorse was kind of nervous about bringing someone in internationally and what they could bring to UNK, but he said that she has been a great attribute and that just her personality has always kind of shined through.
Yeah, it's great to see UNK having success out there on the course, and they've been solid. They won the Newman Invite. They were first out of 9 teams, and then in the Midwest intercollegial meet, they went 4th. They got 4th out of 15 teams, and in a non-varsity event at Concordia, they were 3rd out of 13 teams. So it's nice to see the success of the Loper golf teams, which a lot of people struggle out there on the golf course, the average golfer, but not this UNK golf team, women's golf team.
I would be one of those that struggle on the golf course. Let's just say this, my 9-hole score is twice as much as a varsity girls golf player back in Columbus 18-hole score.
Yeah, that's probably me too, because I'm more the one. I'll stick around the disc golf course. I played a lot of disc golf tournaments, so that's my cup of tea.
Yeah, I'm not a golfer, but best of luck to the UNK golf team as they continue on the season. And we're probably going to go over our time limit today, which is great because we're having an excellent conversation. Next up, UNK women's soccer. They hosted a triangular of exhibitions on Saturday. Their first match was against Northeastern Junior College. Second one against Nebraska Wesleyan, which they got 4 minutes into that one before they had an hour and a half weather delay thanks to the severe storms rolling through. I was able to catch their game against Nebraska Wesleyan, and they played 9v9. Their first game against Northeastern were 25-minute halves. The second one was 30-minute halves, but it's been a good start to the spring season for the soccer team, as they also, back on March 3rd, they played South Dakota State. They went to the national tournament and lost to Nebraska in the first round in the fall, and they beat UNK 1-0 back in March. And that was another great result. They have one transfer that's in. Anna Thor Hallsdotter from Iceland came in from Nichols in between semesters. And so this is a team that's going through their spring semester right now.
Yeah, you like to see this UNK team scoring goals, because that was honestly the struggle of their season, of their fall season, was being able to get the ball in the net, and that's what you want to try and do in soccer. But they always had a solid defense, but it's nice to see that they scored nearly. They scored 2 in the second game, and I think we weren't for sure on the first score, but they handled business in the first game and scored a lot of goals in that first game. So it's nice to see the UNK offense starting to come into fruition for their soccer team.
Absolutely, it's really fun to see Kearney have some success. I know they've struggled in the past years and just going through some changes with the head coaches and things like that, but it's really nice to see them doing well.
Yeah, so they're going to bring in a good bit of recruits in the fall. They're bringing in goalkeeper Emily Brown from California. I believe she's coming off of a state championship over there. Chloe Edmonds out of Idaho. Billy Forrest, that is a name that Brendan thinks will be synonymous with Loper fans here by the end of next fall. Should be an elite scorer, and that's what he is looking for. Serene Hamza out of Iowa, and Daniela Equenta from Aurora, Colorado. Those will be added onto the roster in the fall. But I talked to Brendan a lot just on Friday because he was actually out in Columbus, and he was watching Columbus High play Lincoln East. That's a top 10 matchup out there. That game ended up going to overtime where Lincoln East would win 3-2. That was a fantastic game, but he was out there scouting the night before a doubleheader on Saturday, and he is really giving it all to find the talent for this squad. He's working on a couple of transfers right now for the fall season, and he's trying to make a name in Loper soccer and really improve what this team has done in recent seasons. Of course, going from 0 wins to 3 wins this fall, really trying to improve on that.
Yeah, and you like to see a coach like that that's building for the future, and it is. And he seems always pretty confident about his team and his roster that he's building. So it's nice to see that out of the soccer squad because, like Trinity said, they have not had success in the past. But then going from 0 wins to 3 wins is a pretty big jump if we're talking about UNK women's soccer. But I'm excited for the fall season, how they look here after their spring season, all their exhibitions they play in.
Absolutely.
And a week from this Saturday, April 20th, they'll be hosting an alumni game. They'll be taking on the alumni of UNK. What a special event to connect back to the previous players wearing the Loper blue. And that'll be a fun one. I can't wait to be out at that one. And so that'll be plenty of fun. I can't wait to talk more of them when the fall comes around. But just had to give them their dues for what they've been working on as they had that doubleheader on Saturday. Next up on our KLPR schedule in this coming spring, we got more Loper softball coming up this week. They're coming off of a win against Emporia State in their 4 games this last weekend. On Friday, they'll be taking on Central Missouri, 1 and 3 o'clock from Patriot Park, and myself and Ethan McCormick will be on the call for those games. And then on Saturday, they'll be playing host to Lincoln. John Willis, Train Harmon, and Vita Cabrera have the call for those games. And so those are exclusively on 91.1 KLPR, so be tuning into those. But we're going to step aside, but when we get back, it's time for everyone's favorite segment. It's time for our hot takes on Bringing the Heat.
Hey, is that your second one today?
I just can't focus without energy drinks.
Did you know that a large energy drink contains as much as 27 teaspoons of sugar?
That might be why I'm feeling a sugar crash.
The CDC recommends that people aged over 18 years old should not exceed over 400 milligrams of caffeine in a day.
Shoot, I didn't know that. I need to change my habits.
Exceeding these recommendations could cause irregular heartbeat and heart failure.
Now that I know this information, I will monitor my caffeine intake better.
For more information, visit cdc.gov/healthyschools/nutrition/energy.
Welcome to the greatest day in the life of a university, commencement.
The Alumni Association began in 1906 with the first graduating class of the normal school. We promote communication and interaction among alumni, students, faculty, administrators, and friends of the school. The mission remains steadfast through the Kearney State years and continues today at UNK. To register as a member of the Alumni Association or for info on events, news, and more, visit unkalumni.org. At UNK, we are the difference makers. Our alumni are the difference.
Grandpa is getting older and he keeps forgetting my name, but he never forgets his morning coffee.
I started drinking coffee in college so I could stay up to study, but I kept it up after college because it helped me stay on top of my stressful job.
An unhealthy amount of coffee throughout a day can change a lifetime.
Grandpa, are you okay?
Increased coffee intake can lead to a higher risk of memory loss and heart disease. If you or someone you know is consuming too much coffee, visit mayoclinic.org or call 507-284-2511.
Powdered greens for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. Greens, greens, greens.
Aren't powdered greens only supposed to be used for supplements? Greens are a new trendy nutrition product. I get all the nutrients I need when I take these. No, these need to be complemented by whole fruits and vegetables. What? Much of the nutritional content is lost in the process of making powdered greens. Not to mention, powdered greens are quadruple the price of frozen vegetables. Oh, I had no idea. I guess I'll be on my way to buy more whole fruits and vegetables.
For more information, go to health.unl.edu.
It's time to finish things up on Bringing the Heat. Thank you guys for tuning in. If you're listening live on 91.1 KLPR, or perhaps if you found us wherever you get your podcast, thanks for tuning in. But it's time for our hot takes, and let's regroup what happened last week, because we finally had somebody land on the leaderboard. Trinity, you were out sick. You did not put a prediction out there.
Sorry.
Kade, so close. You had Iowa beating LSU by double digits, and LSU sunk a 3 at the end to kick you back on that one. You were so close, and that actually spurred a little bit of an argument in our group chat. And then Vita had, actually, I'm going to say what I had. I said that Paige Beckers would outscore Caitlin Clark in a game last week, and I came close to that one in their semifinal match on Friday night. Oh, I almost had that. But Clark, I believe, had 23 points. I'm not entirely sure on that, but I do know that I did not get a point. And then Via said that Luis Suarez would play more time than Lionel Messi on Inter Miami while losing 2-1 to CF Monterrey. And that's exactly what happened. So she lands on the board 1-0. So what does our leader Vita think this week? She says Suarez will once again play more than Messi, and Inter Miami will commit more fouls than their last match. We'll see if she can go back-to-back weeks with a point on the board. Myself, I'm going to save that one for last, so let's go to Kade. What do you have this week?
I think UConn will cover the 6.5 point spread against Purdue. I think what I said earlier, the size of the guards compared to Purdue, having Cam Spencer at 6'4", Tristan Newton at 6'5", and Stephon Castle, the Big East freshman of the year, at 6'6" as your guards, and having Donovan Kling at 7'2", 6'8", with their other guard or with the other forward. But it's just, I think the height difference there is going to be the main difference. And then it's going to be UConn's going to be way too much on the offensive side of the ball for Purdue.
And I obviously disagree with you since I went with Purdue. I think Zach Edey will find a way to get it done. Trinity, what do you have this week?
For my hot take, I said Angel Reese is not going to be a top 5 pick in the WNBA draft.
And that could be very realistic. I mean, she is exciting to watch on that basketball court, though. We'll see what happens in the WNBA draft. My hot take for this week, and I submitted this last Monday, so none of you guys can jump on me for this. I said that the women's championship game will have higher ratings than the men's, and after we saw those ratings come in, I absolutely believe that will be true, because the women's game was on ABC, the men's game is on TBS tonight, and not to mention the fact that the women's championship game was the most watched basketball game, men's, women's, college, or pro since 2019. I think I got this one in the bag this week.
Yeah, but I don't know if that's much of a hot take with how Caitlin Clark has just been her status. Everyone wants to watch Caitlin, and then the LSU hype too between those two teams, and then just how South Carolina going undefeated into the tournament, and then throughout the tournament, and then finishing the tournament undefeated. So
yeah, I don't know how much that's bringing the heat, Elijah.
I feel like it was last week. Whenever I submitted in the group chat, I felt like it was a hot take.
It could have been. Yeah, you're probably right. But with the men's game, right, like you said, being on TBS instead of a CBS, not like the main NBC, ABC, CBS is usually which games get the most ratings. So that's just a tough draw for the men. But I think you're going to be right. I think you're going to
be right.
There's a reason why I didn't wait till today or yesterday to say it, because that's not a hot take then. I said it early in the week when there was plenty of uncertainty of whether it would happen. And for all we know, TBS may have spectacular ratings tonight. Who knows what could happen? But I mean, hey, maybe. But let's get on to, because this is what's on my mind this week. The ratings, the popularity, and the growth of the women's game has kind of come out of nowhere. The ratings for the women's game went up 285% from 2 years ago. And 3 years ago, their weight room was a table and dumbbells in the bubble. Like, where did all of this growth and popularity in this game really come from?
I think just what you said there, that attention 3 years ago of how unfairly the women were treated in the NCAA tournament. There we go. Just with that, bringing social media attention, and with social media being able to grab so many attention, even of those who are not involved in basketball. I remember just seeing TikTok feed of all different people saying, I've never watched basketball before, but after seeing this and after seeing this player on TikTok, it's just brought in more views. And then obviously Caitlin Clark being a star, breaking records all across the board, not only for Iowa, but for just women's collegiate basketball, and even just on both sides, women's and men's, being able to catch the hype. And then also last year, that LSU Iowa hype, and then being able to have that matchup again this year, I think that's something that a lot of people are wanting to see. So just over time, I think it's been building.
Yeah, over like the last couple of years, like especially last year, with even going into the Elite Eight when Iowa played against Louisville and Hannah Van Lin, when she played on, that was a huge game. And that's where kind of the whole beef started with LSU and Iowa, was Caitlin Clark doing the "you can't see me," and then they misinterpreted it. I don't know. There was a whole beef about that, and then having the LSU Iowa rematch again this year, and then having another rematch with Iowa and South Carolina was a rematch from last year. So I think it's just over the years with these girls, the game's been getting a lot better, and then with obviously Caitlin Clark being the main culprit of all of that, because with her shooting 30-footers consistently and draining them is a must-see TV watching her. But so it's going to be interesting with her leaving the college game. If it I hope it keeps building steam. I hope people continue to watch, because you still have Juju Watkins and Paige Beckers, and then the talent out of high school just keeps getting better and better. It's great to see out of women's basketball, and especially with the people that have been growing the game since the 90s, and everybody, all these past coaches and players seeing this come to fruition, how popular women's basketball has gotten now.
I think that would tag onto your aunt as well, as trying to grow that game. Brenna Van Langen, for those of you who don't know Cade's aunt. But this is something where I still don't understand what caused this to spurt so dramatically, because this is something like we are just all of a sudden realizing how good of a game it is, but how come it's getting such bigger ratings than the men's games? Like, I don't understand the Caitlin Clark effect. I just don't.
Because there's no other player. I feel like there's no. I guess you could say like a Keisei Tominaga or a Jack Golke, but like Caitlin, but they got beat. Those two teams that had those crazy 3-point shooters only went one game into the tournament, and Nebraska losing in the first round. But Caitlin Clark doing that every single game, shooting consistent 30-footers, 35-footers, making fadeaway threes. It's must-see. It's the Stephen Curry effect, I would say, even for this. But Steph Curry for the men's game, and for the women's game, Caitlin Clark, they're completely changing the game and how they play it. So people watching Caitlin Clark and seeing what she does is why it's why I feel like that's why it's went up so much, is because of her. And I'm glad Dawn Staley at the end of the game gave her props at the end of the game.
Absolutely. I agree with Kade, just because a girl like Caitlin, or a player like Caitlin Clark, doesn't come often. So just how she's grown over the years and grabbing the attention of different people just throughout her game. And it's not like every girl is shooting 3-pointers from the volleyball line. So like, it's just something we haven't seen before, and people are interested in watching it and seeing it for themselves and being able to watch history.
I'm not saying I disagree. It's just insane to me how that has happened in a 3-year time span of how fast it's grown. I literally wrote this last week and I said I wasn't able to say this on the show, we ran out of time, but I wrote this up before last week's show, and I said that there is a reason why the men's tournament is better than the women's. The men's tournament has Cinderellas, but the women's game has the talent and the stars. Everyone knows who Zach Edey was, and we don't care that much about him, but we all learned who DJ Burns and Jack Golke were. And we fell in love with watching them play, and that's what made the men's tournament better in my eyes. And that was my view a week ago. But then I turned on the television yesterday, and I'm watching Caitlin Clark and Camila Cardoso battle it out. And it's fascinating to me how it's so much entertaining to watch the women play, and Juju Watkins make USC's rise to fame, and it's just incredible. And I don't know how much other ways to describe it, how my viewpoint can change in 1 week. And we were talking about this in our first break, that the first couple weeks of the show, we spent maybe 5-10 minutes talking about the women's March Madness tournament. We spent 20 on it this week, and now we're spending this whole segment on it right now. It is amazing how it's taken everybody by storm. It was the most watched sporting event since 2019, excluding football and the Olympics. And I don't know if you guys have any other comments to add on to it.
I think just the power of social media and the media coverage in today's day and age is also really powerful, just because of everyone, Caitlin Clark catching the attention of people and then people sharing that through social media. And then also just the power of people wanting to be a part of history and being able to see this with their own eyes kind of caught storm.
Yeah, I agree with Trinity on that, with just everyone kind of wanting to be a part of it, everybody wanting to watch Caitlin Clark. But the one thing I would say about the women's tournament building building so much popularity is they play their first round matchups and second round matchups at the higher seeds, home court. And I think now with this more popularity, they should do neutral sites, because that was one thing about the women's tournament this year. There wasn't a whole lot of first round upsets, only like one lower seed won. So I would like to see that out of the women's tournament. But with these star players is why they got so much viewership, in my opinion. But with the men's, it's like there's a lot more upsets, and like you could say there's a lot more upsets because that's where the storylines begin with Jack Golke and DJ Burns, and then that's kind of with American sports as a whole, like the underdog story. That's like with in the NFL, like Tommy DeVito making their own storyline about being the Italian quarterback with his agent. So you like seeing that all throughout American sports, these storylines and star players. But so American sports, women's or men's, it's just continuing to grow, and you love to see it, especially for the women's, how far we've came just over the last 5 or 6 years even, and how much we've been talking about on this show.
But my concern is these ratings, I don't think would have been this high. I think they might have been in a half at the maximum if UConn would have went on to beat Iowa. I'm just concerned about the women's game, and with Caitlin Clark leaving, if it's going to sustain the same success that it had this year. Because I'm not going to say that I didn't enjoy watching it, but I'm just worried that other people aren't going to love it like they did when Caitlin Clark was playing.
Yeah.
That's valid.
There you go.
I was going to also say, like, a little bit of a hot take, just personally. You guys can tell me if I'm wrong. I don't watch a lot of men's basketball anymore, but I also feel just in the women's game, there's a lot more of a focus on defense along with offense, where I feel like men is just a lot more offense focused. Like, it literally bugs me watching men's games and nobody box out because their athleticism, you're just going to jump out the next man next to you. But that's, once again, my personal opinion. I don't watch a lot of men's basketball anymore. So
I feel like that's a lot with the NBA is a lack of defense. But
that's where I was going.
But it's in the NBA, those players are just so talented. Maybe they are trying to play defense, but then these players like Jokic and Luka are making these crazy fadeaway shots. But
literally,
yeah. That's the thing that was kind of worrying me with Caitlin Clark leaving the college basketball scene, if the ratings would go down. But I could see the WNBA ratings going up because of it. I think the ratings might go down slightly, but not very drastically with Caitlin Clark leaving. But it'll be interesting. But she was a very fun player to watch while she was playing at Iowa.
I think that'd be a great question to ask your Anna about on Wednesday. Her opinion on that. I'd be interested to hear that. But I was going to go to the NBA route as well. Unless the Timberwolves are playing in the NBA, I don't watch the NBA. I have no reason to watch the NBA. I don't want to see offense. I don't want to see 7.5 feet tall guys dunking the ball or just shooting threes. I want to see tough physical basketball, and I want to see that emotion played out. I just don't want to see people playing playground ball. I don't care to see that.
Yeah, I agree. I'd much rather watch tough defense and good offense breaking it down. But it's going to be interesting to see how women's college basketball continues to grow after Caitlin Clark.
It is, and so hopefully you guys enjoyed listening to us ramble about sports here for the last hour, mainly about women's basketball as a whole. But time will tell. But as time works, we'll see you guys all next week on Bringing the Heat.